Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. This is Kathy Fitzmaurice from the Central Office, and I'll be your host for today's webinar, Developing a Customer Service Culture. Your microphones and telephones are currently muted to eliminate background noise during the program. You can ask questions throughout the presentation. To do this, type it into the question box on your control panel, or if you have a working microphone, you can raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon, and I'll unmute you. Today's program is being recorded and will be available through WebMQS in the Shared Resources section. So let's get started. I'm pleased to introduce Kate Baker, Business Advisor from our Albany SBDC. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you, Kathy. Good morning, everybody. So I thought we would start with something a little bit different and actually start with a poll to see where everybody thinks we are on customer service. So Kathy, you want to get that started?
All right, everyone, you should see a question on your screen, so go ahead and click your answer. I'll give you just a few more seconds to do that. I see only 57, now 71% of you have voted. All right. So I'm going to close this question, and then we've got a second question that we'll have come up. So there's your second question. So I'll give you, again, about 30 seconds to pick your answer. All right, now we'll go to our next question. There you go, and again, you'll have about 30 seconds to select your answer. And one more. All right, I think we've had everyone vote, so we'll go ahead and look at what the answers were. Kate, you're able to see this, right?
I am not.
Oh, you're not?
Okay.
I
I have the answers.
So the first question.
In response to question number 1, what percentage of unhappy customers actually complain? The correct answer was 4%, which means that 91% of the customers that are unhappy with something in your business will just leave and never come back. Number 2, 70% of the customer buying experience is attributed to the perception of how they are treated during their purchase transaction. Number 3, it takes 12 positive experiences to overcome a negative customer experience. And the thing to keep in mind with that little factoid is that only 4% of the customers will even clue you in as to whether or not they fall into that category, which makes it a little bit harder to manage that. And the cost ratio of keeping a new customer or keeping an existing customer versus a new customer is going to be 6 to 7 times more than acquiring a new one. So some of the things you may have heard before, some of them may be new factoids to you, but they're pretty important when you're thinking about how customers impact your business long term. If I leave you with nothing else today, probably the most important thing that you need to realize when it comes to customer service is that it's all about perception, and that's the perception of the customer. So no matter how well you think you did in providing service to the person that you are assisting, if they don't feel that your service reached a certain level, it doesn't matter how much you did. There is an age-old saying, I've heard it a lot in the hospitality industry, which is where I come from, that if you have great customer service, I'm going to tell everybody that I know about it. If service is average or just okay, I might or might not even mention that I did business with you. But if I have a bad service experience, I'm likely to make friends just so that I can tell them about it. And I didn't think that that applied to me, at least until I'd had a bad customer service experience after I'd heard that saying. And now I realize that I absolutely resemble that remark, and so do a lot of people that I know. So keep that in mind when you're talking about service to your clients or you're providing service yourselves through the SBDC. That no matter what it is that you do, you want to make sure that the client's perception is a positive one. So what we're going to kind of talk about today is really the stages of customer engagement, incorporating customer service into the corporate culture, the impacts of employee engagement, and service recovery programs. So before we begin with the stages of customer engagement, I'd like to take just a quick minute and have everyone think of their best ever experience as a customer and then their worst ever experience as a customer. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to do that. Okay, so I'd like to share with you my best ever and my worst ever. And what's funny about that is that they're both in purchasing cars. The thing you should know about me is I impulse purchase cars. Typically every 2.5 to 3 years, I'll decide on a Wednesday I'm going to buy a car and stop on my way home from work to do so. My best ever customer service experience was when I was living in Boston. I was driving home from work. I had a Jeep Wrangler and I had to stop for gas, and I decided that I didn't like to do that as much as I was having to, so I stopped at the Mazda dealership to buy a car. When I purchased the car, there was a caveat to the purchase. I had a New York State license, registration, and insurance, and I didn't want to switch that over to Boston because of the insurance costs. So when I purchased the car, they agreed to register the car in New York for me without a hassle. Picked it up the next day. Everything was done perfect. I was all set. Fast forward 3 years later, I'm now living in the Adirondacks, and I'm on my way to school, and I've decided that I don't like the Mazda anymore, and it's time for me to buy a Honda. So I pull into the Honda dealership, and I decide to buy the car. Through a series of miscommunications with my salesperson, it took 6 days for me to take possession of the car, but I eventually got it. And when I got the survey, I rated the guy average. After they got the survey back, the salesperson called me to berate me for rating him average, which now made him the worst ever experience that I've had. Never been berated for making a large purchase before. So when you're thinking of the good and the negative experiences that you have as a customer, the thing that you need to realize is that every previous experience that you've had built into the expectation of the next one, right? Most people haven't had that buying experience when purchasing a car, where they're going to register it in another state and make it a super simple process. The average experience that I started off with, that became my worst experience, and it all had to do with how they handled it. Had they called and said, I'm really sorry that you felt it was average, would you mind telling me why, would have been a lot different than yelling at me for it. So something to keep in mind. In the poll, we just confirmed that it costs 6 to 7 times more to get a new customer than it does an existing one. But some other things that you may not know about the costs of a customer. Price is not the main reason that customers leave your business. It's actually due to overall poor quality of customer service. A customer is 4 times more likely to defect to a competitor if the problem is service-related than price or product-related. The probability of selling to an existing customer is 60 to 70%. The probability of selling to a new customer is 5 to 10%. A 2% increase in customer retention has the same effect as decreasing customer cost by 10%. A dissatisfied customer will tell between 9 to 15 people about their experience. Around 13% of dissatisfied customers tell more than 20 people. Happy customers who get their issues resolved tell about 4 to 6 people about their experience. So the cost is just not tangible in what you have to spend to get them. It relates to bottom lines, it relates to your sales process and your buying patterns. And when you look at it from the math perspective, if it costs you $15 to get a new customer and you need 100 customers, it's going to cost you $1,500. If you are just looking to save 100 customers, you can reduce your cost to $214, which is roughly $1,200 that usually will translate directly to the bottom line. So my bottom line with customer service is that loyalty results from customer bonding and does not automatically follow from successive customer interactions without a plan to build the customer bond. Building the bond with a customer is one of the most often overlooked aspects of customer loyalty. So how do you build that customer loyalty? The first place that you're going to start is understanding where your customer is in the loyalty platform. There are 6 different stages. The try customer, which is your first-time customer, they're kind of going through that try test with you. Their interactions are entirely about them. They have absolutely no stake in what it is that you do. Their purchase is directly related to a personal need and want. There tends to be relatively limited interaction, limited customer feedback, and it is a very tenuous relationship. The familiar customer is a returning customer. It's somebody that has done business with you at least once before. And this is a customer where there is actually an opportunity to start to build that relationship. There's very limited buy-in. It's still all about them, but there is a little bit more awareness of who you are. However, they already have an expectation based on their previous interaction with you. The repeat customer is somebody who's comfortable in doing business with you and your employees. There is the beginnings of a relationship with that customer, and you've started to build that loyalty cycle, and the expectations of the customer increase. The like customers are those people that have started to integrate your business into their daily patterns. So think for yourselves, where do you stop for coffee every day on your way into work? Where do you always go to buy your groceries? What are your favorite clothing stores? These are businesses that you have kind of built into the way you live your life, and those are the like customers. There is a definite relationship with these customers. It's still relatively early stage, but they have invested emotionally a little bit. They have a high expectation level, and this is really where the loyalty piece starts to take root. The customers at the trust level have an advanced level of customer bonding. If you go in there, the customer is going to expect that you know who they are, either by name or by face. They have that high expectation level, and they actually trust that you're going to meet it. There's a strong relationship and a strong relationship of loyalty. The advocate customer is really the highest stage of customer loyalty, and these advocates actually become your sales force, because these are people that are out in the market that are advocating to their friends, family, professional networks that other people do business with you. They are highly invested, and they have the highest level of loyalty. They also are at the most at risk, because if you have a service failure and don't handle it properly, they are going to be very quick to go. Now, before we can talk about customer service and incorporating it into corporate culture, I think it would be a good idea to talk a little bit about what corporate culture is. So really, it's a combination of shared values, shared mental assumptions, leadership behaviors, and employee behaviors. It can be reflected in things like the dress code, business hours, office setup, employee benefits, turnover, hiring decisions, treatment of clients, client satisfaction, and really every other aspect of the business operations. In 2013, MSN Money listed their top 15 Hall of Fame customer service companies. 3 of those were Amazon, Marriott, and UPS. Amazon had a 57.3 excellent rating with their customer base, and they consider customer service as the linchpin on which their company actually operates. They have managed to develop a user-friendly website, have a brand that's associated with low prices, one-click shopping, no hassle returns. There are free shipping options, and somehow, and I'm not really sure how they did it, they've managed to build a sense of community around an online platform, which is extremely difficult to do, but they've been very successful in doing that. Marriott has a 42.6 excellent rating, and they attribute their success with their customer service to hiring the right people and letting them decide how to treat their customers. There's a hotel in Florida that credits most of their customer service success to their breakfast hostess, and she was recently awarded as one of the top 10 workers. This particular hotel specializes in renting rooms to cancer treatment patients, and she will leave the breakfast area and deliver breakfast to those cancer patients every morning, check on them, and make sure that they're okay. And then UPS, 41.3 excellent rating, and they don't see customer service as a separate unit or a department. They really try to incorporate it into their culture. And one of the ways that they've been able to do that is by embracing the fact that they have a union workforce and they refuse to work with contract labor. So they expect a higher level buy-in through that workforce, and it has really worked for them since they established the business in Seattle in 1907. And for every Hall of Fame, there is a Hall of Shame. The top 3 shameful customer service companies in 2013 were Comcast, Dish Network, and Citibank. Between the 3 of them, they had a lot of similarities as to how they landed there. Rigid policies, missed late appointments, difficult to navigate call centers, high-pressure sales tactics, failed core services, termination fees and contracts, and then multiple small fees for utilizing the service in addition to whatever rate they had agreed to. What I found interesting about the Hall of Shame list is that it was dominated by telecommunications, cable and TV service providers, and financial institutions. So what that says about that industry, not so sure, but that's who most of those businesses were. If you're looking to build a customer service-based culture in an organization, you really have to start at the top. Management is always going to reflect and mimic the behaviors and values of ownership, and employees are going to reflect and mimic the behaviors of management. So you have to practice what you preach, and you have to reward the positive behaviors and results. You can't have a do as I say, not as I do platform if you're building a culture. Culture is about community, and it's important that it does start at the top. You also have to make sure that you're very clear about the behaviors that are acceptable and those that are not. If you don't want people sleeping at their desks, don't sleep at your desk. If you don't want people yelling at customers, then don't yell at the people who work for you. If you don't want your employees gossiping, then you shouldn't be gossiping either. In addition to not doing the behaviors, anytime you witness them, you need to bring the people involved and relate them as coachable moments and opportunities to change behaviors from within. Communication is a key in any customer service-based culture as well. It's important that you communicate to your employees and to your management teams why customer service is important to you, what's at stake, what are the numbers that are associated with it, and what is it going to mean to them long term. You also have to be able to demonstrate what it looks like, whether it's modeling the behaviors, providing them with training, and then you need to make sure they know how to deliver it. Role-playing exercises are an excellent tool for that, and then identifying those coachable moments again. If you see something that should have or could have been handled differently, instead of yelling at them or getting mad, take the positive attitude with it and say, okay, it wasn't perfect. Let's talk about how it could have been better. What other resources do you have? What can we do to make this a better situation for you? It's also important to encourage responsibility. If you have a lot of negative reactions when things don't go exactly perfectly, the end result is that employees are going to stop telling you when things aren't going well. In addition to that, they're also going to start to look to point fingers so that they don't take that negative response back from you. And it's important that you practice what you preach with this. Back when I was working in hotels, I had a residence inn in Burlington. I had a sales director that overbooked our hotel by 30 rooms for long-term stays. And although I was okay with it, I made the director of sales stand at the front desk and help them assist the 30 people that were getting reassigned to another hotel, because it's about responsibility. If you're going to make a choice, you have to deal with the consequences, but you also have to deal with them in a positive way. So you want to encourage and foster that in an organization. You also need to take a look at your company policies. Are they actually customer friendly, or are they really going to put the onus onto the customer? Do they factor in the situational components of your customer transactions? Because we deal with people in business, and we deal with other companies and we deal with technology, every situation is going to be a little bit different. And do your policies factor in that so that your employees are aware of how to handle the different situational components of a business operation? Are they flexible where possible? And do they empower employees to make the right decisions based on the situation, which is going to be critical to having them deliver the type of service that you want? It's also important to hire for the culture. If you're going to factor customer service into your overall operational culture and your business culture, it has to become part of your hiring process as well. And there are key personality traits that need to be included in your interview process. You also need to identify those things that are trainable versus technical versus inherent. So inherent personality traits are things that are part of the person and not something that you can actually train. And research has shown that those customer service stars in any organization have a couple of very common traits within their personalities. They tend to be friendly, compassionate, attentive, have a calming presence, persuasive, tenacious, and have a willingness to learn. Some trainable customer service skills that you need to factor in is the ability to communicate, knowledge of the product, service, or company that they're working for or with, how to use positive language, acting skills always help in customer service, and time management. The ability to read customers and handle surprises is also something that can be learned over time. So when it comes to employee engagement, why this is so critical is if you kind of look at the matrix that's on the screen, you'll see that your employees are the ones that provide the service, and the service is what relates to customer satisfaction, which relates to customer loyalty, which then translates into growth and profit. If you don't have engaged employees, your service is not necessarily going to be A, consistent, or B, what you think it is or should be. It's also important to know the difference between satisfaction versus engagement. Employee satisfaction is actually a measure of an employee's happiness with a company, their particular job, their coworkers, and other factors. While an employee's happiness or satisfaction is very important, and it can contribute to their engagement, it's not the same thing. Engaged employees speak positively about the organization to others, are committed to remaining with their current employer, are motivated by their organization's leaders, managers, cultures, values, and go above and beyond. They have a commitment to the organization's strategy or mission, their emotional attachment to their job or organization. They have enthusiasm for their work and the degree to which they act to further their organization's interests. Now, engaged employees, there's different levels of engagement. So those that are highly engaged, they're going to utilize their talents on a daily basis. They will demonstrate consistent levels of high performance. They build connections and professional networks. They're really committed to the organization and its values. They tend to be high energy. They like to broaden what they're capable of doing within the organization. And they help make the organization more profitable and successful. Those moderately engaged, they're perfectly fine with just meeting their performance goals. They're satisfied with their position in the organization and don't have any hopes for growth or improvement. And in short, they're going to do what's required, but they're never going to do more than that. The disengaged employee often doesn't know what's expected of them, and they also don't ask for clarification. They may not feel as though they have the resources they need to do their work effectively. They also feel that they weren't trained properly to provide the level of work that's expected of them. They have zero commitment to the organization or coworkers. And they can actually end up costing the organization between $3,400 and $10,000. $3,400 for every $10,000 paid in salary. So they're your worst kind of employee, especially for customer service and for bottom line. Now, engagement research has also shown that employees' mindset or attitude about their ability to impact quality, cost, and customer service will vary with their engagement level. The more engaged an employee is, the more they believe they can make a difference, and the more they actually try. So let's talk about the money associated with disengaged or engaged employees. There is an actual cost to the engagement. So a fully engaged employee is going to give you 120% return in salary that you're paying them. An engaged employee you're going to break even on. A somewhat disengaged employee is only going to give you an 80% return, which in fact means that it's going to cost you 20% of their salary. And disengaged employees are going to give you a 60% return or cost you 40%. And when you apply that to some numbers, if your employee makes $80,000 a year and you pay them, and they are fully engaged, they will return back to the company $96,000 in value or create $16,000 of additional value to your organization beyond what you're paying them for. The engaged employee, you're going to break even on. They'll bring back $80,000. The somewhat disengaged employee is going to cost you $16,000, which is not good. Ideally, you need to at least break even on your employees. And the somewhat disengaged employee is going to cost you $32,000, and that's an annual number. So for a small business, losing money on employees can actually be what makes or breaks them financially year to year. You're going to need to know how to improve employee engagement, and it really does start with manager training. If your managers don't know what's expected of them and the culture and how they are expected to deliver the customer service, it's never going to translate down to the employee level. So you need to have coaching for both managers and for employees, and those coachable moments, anytime things don't go exactly perfectly, taking that step back with a positive outlook of saying, okay, so that wasn't perfect. What could we have done better? How could this have gone differently? What resources do you not have to handle those situations? How do we make this better? And then you need to train your employees on what empowerment really is and giving them the ability to make the decisions based on what the right thing to do with that particular situation is. What are acceptable levels of apology and handling situations? You don't want to give somebody empowerment without giving them the guidelines and the framework in which you want them to work. Because not every service infraction requires a full-blown free service, free product, letter of apology from the CEO, etc. Sometimes a simple "I'm sorry" is good enough. And then it's also important to pay for performance. If you want your employees to exhibit a particular behavior, reward it. Have your bonus programs tied to service levels and customer surveys and or letters that come in from customers, both positive and negative. I remember when I was a teenager, my brother was working in a hotel, and he was brand new there. He walked into the lobby, saw a piece of paper on the floor, picked it up. What he didn't know is that the owner of the company was sitting in the lobby, saw him do it, and got a raise of $1 an hour for it. And then he told everybody else that he got a raise of $1 an hour for doing the right thing without being told. So you just have to really put your money where your mouth is when it comes to getting engaged employees that are going to be focused on that service culture. It's also important to hire right the first time. It's not always good to hire just because you need somebody. It's sometimes more important to wait for that right applicant to come along. When you're looking at it from a service perspective, a bad hire for customer service is really actually very hard to overcome. It usually leads to some level of customer dissatisfaction and a downgrade in customer loyalty, as well as the eventual departure of the employee. So when you're doing your interviewing for people when it's related to service, make sure you have those open-ended questions that are going to give you the results and the type of person that you really want to have with your organization. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about service recovery. Service recovery is the fine art of taking a situation that didn't go just so or just perfectly and turning it into a high loyalty experience. Customer research has shown that your most loyal customers are those that have experienced some form of service failure that was recovered well within the organization. It creates that higher level of trust and actually can develop those trust level customers into advocates. If you don't have a service recovery program in place, that 91% of customers that experience a problem are going to be more likely to just walk away and never come back, and you'll never know why they didn't come back. You should know where you fall in the phase of service recovery, and there are a couple of different phases. Those doomed companies, it's where there is no complaint handling. Angry customers are ignored. The process is difficult, and they don't seem to really care at all whether or not you're happy. Probably a lot of those hollow shame companies fall under this doomed category. Most companies fall under the reactive category, and those are companies that respond well when the customer makes a complaint. And if all of the customers would make the complaint, they would be just fine. But because only 4% of customers are actually going to let you know when there's a problem, being reactive isn't really good enough. The active listening stage has a higher level of response to complaints when received, but it's still reactive in nature. There's a little bit more compassion and empathy in the process. Companies that are solicitous in their service recovery programs actually seek out the positive and negative feedbacks from their customers. They make it very easy for a customer to give them their feedback, both positive and negative. Every company I've ever worked for in the hospitality actually looks for negative criticism, because the positive criticism doesn't give us anything to work on other than we're doing things great. But negative or constructive criticism gives us a pathway to at least improve ourselves and our product and our customer training. And the infused companies are those that make it part of their everyday existence. The customer is considered in every aspect of the operation, whether it's how they pay their bills, how they build their revenues, what products and services they're offering, the language that they use when talking to customers, both internal and external, and how they treat each other. They are very solicitous in nature of their feedback, and they make it very easy and have a high level of response in both time it takes to get back to the customer and how they handle it. When you're putting together a service recovery program, it's important to know the guiding principles of all service recovery. First and foremost is active listening. You have to actually hear what the customer is saying. A lot of times in a complaint, they tend to be very lengthy, but there's 3 or 4 key words that you need to have caught in that conversation. And so verifying that what you heard is what they're saying will actually make the process go a lot simpler. And then you also need to take responsibility when responsibility is called for. If you made a mistake or there was a service failure on your end, it's important to own up to it and say, yes, we didn't do what we were supposed to do, and make sure that you can apologize. You should also be empathetic. When you're empathetic, you're making sure that the customer knows that you know what it feels like to be in their shoes, because not all service failures are things that are going to be things that you necessarily have a control over. And making them feel as though they're not isolated in this experience without letting them think that the company is a complete failure is a really important skill to have. And then your apology needs to be sincere. It can't be, I'm sorry, but. Either you're sorry or you're not. So when you're issuing your apology, make sure it's sincere in nature, that there aren't caveats attached to it, and then follow it up with, how can we make this better, or provide some options to make it better. I've always found that asking what they're looking for will give you the answer to make them happy, and many times it's something smaller than you ever imagined. And then empowerment. If you aren't empowering your employees to handle the situations as they arise, every time you have to escalate a customer complaint to another level in order for it to be handled is another level that the customer is upset. So if the person that they initially talked to can't help them and it has to go multiple levels, that's a problem, and you have to take a look at some of those policies. I remember when I was dealing with Verizon once, I had to go all the way up to the CEO, and I still never got what I needed. So my likelihood of doing business with them is pretty small, and I just told a whole bunch of my new friends how much I love Verizon. So those are my thoughts on customer service and building it into a culture. And I thought we would take the last couple of minutes for the program and really talk about, or answer questions and talk about anything that you feel is important related to the topic. Anybody have any questions?
Questions, anybody? Any comments?
Any stories you want to tell?
Kate, it seems to me like customer service is something that's really been slipping over the years. Is that something you feel you've noticed too?
I think it depends on the industry. The higher tech the industry, the less likely they are to have an understanding of how customer service matters. When you're dealing with service-based industries, hotels, restaurants, salons, spas, those types of things, anything where the consumer is receiving a service, those industries seem to be continuing to move forward and be proactive in making sure they're on top of their game.
Anybody? Any comments? Oh, we have a question. Someone would like to know more about dealing with difficult employees.
Well, there's a lot of different ways to deal with difficult employees. A lot of it's going to depend on why they're difficult. Are they difficult because you hired the wrong employee for the wrong position? If that's the case, sometimes it's just better to cut your losses and let them move on to something that's going to be better for them as well as better for you. If they're a difficult employee because they don't have the tools, the resources, the buy-in, or the engagement, then you really have to take a look back at what's wrong with the process of the company. Did we not give them the training that they need? Do they not have the resources? Do they not have the support that they need from within the organization? And when it's that type of situation, then the onus is really on management to provide those resources. And that's how you can really take a difficult employee and move them forward. But if they're being difficult just to be difficult, it's almost time to cut your losses and move forward.
Susanna, you had your hand raised. Do you have a question? I've unmuted you.
Oh, I just wanted to know how to handle a difficult customer.
I love difficult customers. So
Yeah.
really, a lot of times, a lot of things with customer service are very situational. So when you have a disgruntled customer, most of the time they're disgruntled because of nothing you've done, and they really just need to vent. So I've always found that listening in an active format where I can repeat back the key elements of what they're trying to get across to me will go very far. If it's something that I've done, I really think ownership and responsibility is a key factor to it. In my family's business, if we have a problem and we did something wrong, the very first words out of our mouth are, "I'm very sorry," and we truly mean it. How can we make this better for you? And I think that the minute you take the onus away from the customer and making it easy for them to feel better and kind of taking away every reason they have to be angry, automatically lowers that level of being disgruntled. Because it's kind of hard to be angry at somebody who's going to give you what you want. And then if you can't give them what they want, be honest about it and say, you know, I'm very sorry, but that's not something that we're capable of giving you, and offer some alternatives.
I'm muted. All right, you answered my question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kate, how about customers are there times where that customers are just not good customers and you should cut your losses?
Oh, all the time. So if you are trying to sell a low-end customer a high-end product, really it's never going to happen because they don't have the resources to purchase it. When you're trying to sell a high-end customer a low-end product, there is no way you're going to satisfy their need because they're a high-end customer. So making sure that your customers meet the products and services that you're selling and being honest about who you are and what you do is going to be really important. You know, Amazon has done a great job of this, and you know, they're an online platform. There are not people ready to talk to you 24/7 in your living room. There is no personal interaction. They've kind of built the expectation of what people can expect. And although people are going to bring their previous experiences with them when they go to the site, their branding and marketing has really been honest and true to who and what they are. So it's important not to be all things to all people. And if it's not your customer, it's not your customer. You just need to let it go and move on to the actual real customer. We see that a lot in the sales process, that people are selling to the wrong customer demographic. And that will make your service a lot harder.
Anyone else? Any other questions or comments? We've got Leslie. I've unmuted you.
Yeah, it's really funny. She just happened to have mentioned maybe selling to the wrong person. What I've seen with the difference, because I'm older, with millennials as opposed to older people, we go in for a certain product and we want to be treated a certain way, but sometimes the millennials want to see certain things. They want to see if you're using quote-unquote sustainable methods in the business and that sort of a thing. And if what you do can't satisfy them, you might lose that demographic. Is that just one of the things you just have to suck it up and say, yep, that's life?
Well, you have to either adapt your business to the demographic, or you have to say goodbye to the customer. Because any alternative to that is just going to end in failure, because if millennials are looking for you to be using recycled products, and so you put out all this green initiative stuff that you say that you're doing, and then when they find out that you don't do it, it creates a bigger problem that you can't recover from. So it's kind of like the Made in USA brand labels that were sewn on in China.
Yeah.
Right? You don't recover from that once it's hit. So you either have to take a look at your business model from a sales process and say, is this a demographic that's important to us, and what can we do without disrupting our operations, and then what do we need to do beyond that moving forward? And if you actually do those things, that's great. But you can't have a recycling program and then get caught throwing everything into the same dumpsters.
That's what I was thinking. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? No, I don't think we've got any more questions or comments, Kate.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening to me talk for about a half an hour. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kate. That was a great presentation, and everybody, thank you for your questions. And again, this was recorded, so you can see it in shared resources in WebMQS. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Kate, and this ends our presentation. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you.